Welcome to the debate on Press TV. I'm your host, Behruz Najafi. It abandoned the deal more than 2 years ago, but is still trying hard to impose its will on others. Washington has recently been attempting to invoke rights deriving from a UN resolution endorsing the Iran nuclear deal to impose a permanent arms embargo on Tehran. Now, based on the JCPOA, to which Iran has adhered even after the U.S. exit, an arms ban on the Islamic Republic will be lifted this October. Now, Moscow is calling for a universal condemnation of what it calls Washington's politically motivated anti-Iran move. Tehran argues Washington's push for an extension of the UN arms embargo lacks any legal standing in international law. Stay with us and watch us discuss the issue with analysts. Let's watch a background report first.
The United States' plan to get the UN Security Council to impose a permanent arms embargo on Iran has been met by opposition from Moscow. In a letter to UN Security General Antonio Guterres, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov called for universal condemnation of the U.S. attempt, describing Washington's plan as ridiculous.
There are statements by U.S. State Department officials that the Trump administration doesn't plan to resume its commitments under the nuclear deal, but plans to invoke rights allegedly deriving from the resolution endorsing it are ridiculous and irresponsible.
Lavrov said the U.S. withdrew from the 2015 nuclear agreement and now has no legal right to try to use the UN resolution endorsing the deal to indefinitely continue the arms embargo. Their reaction came just a few days after the U.S. shared a draft UN Security Council resolution with Russia on extending the embargo against Iran. The sanction on the sale and purchase of weapons on Tehran were imposed in 2007. It is due to expire on October 18th as part of the nuclear deal. The U.S. has outlined two ways to prevent the embargo from expiring. The first U.S. option is a new Security Council resolution to extend the embargo indefinitely. However, China and Russia have signaled their opposition. The second is that the U.S. triggered the snapback of all UN sanctions on Iran, including arms embargo, by accusing Tehran of breaching its nuclear deal commitments. Iran argues that the move lacks legal standing since the U.S. withdrew from the 2015 nuclear deal and is no longer a member of the nuclear agreement.
The U.S. cannot be a JCPOA participant since Donald Trump ceased U.S. participation. The U.S., which is in violation of the nuclear deal, has no right to initiate anything under the Security Council Resolution 2231.
The remarks have also been reiterated by China, a permanent member of the Security Council.
The United States failed to meet its obligations under Resolution 2231 by withdrawing from the JCPOA. It has no right to extend an arms embargo on Iran, let alone trigger a snapback. Maintaining the JCPOA is the only right way moving forward.
Washington's allies confess that the U.S.'s request is absurd. EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell says since the United States has already withdrawn from the deal, it can't now use its former membership of the pact to try to impose a permanent arms embargo on the Islamic Republic. Despite Borrell's rejection, the EU may still bow down to U.S. pressure, and one of the European signatories triggered a snapback at the Security Council. The U.S. says extending the embargo is a top priority. However, the move could be the last straw that causes the collapse of the nuclear deal. In such a case, the U.S. and its allies should bear responsibility for the consequence of their action.
Okay, with that report, let me now invite our guests to the show. We'll have Senior Congressional Defense Advisor Frederick Peterson from New York and Editor of Politics First, Marcus Papadopoulos, is joining us from London. Great to have you both, gentlemen. Now let's go to Frederick. Donald Trump pulled his country out of the Iran nuclear deal in 2018. The U.S. is no more a party to the deal, and naturally it has no right to initiate the snapback of sanctions against Iran based on UN Resolution 2231. So what is all this fuss about?
The fuss is, first of all, shall I say, it's quite unnecessary. But the fuss that is being created is not even necessarily originating within Iran. The fuss, I believe, is originating from the allies of Iran, supposedly allies, but they are really using and exploiting Iran as a client state to do their machinations, shall we say, around the world, and that would be Russia and China. quite obviously taking advantage of Iran, and Iran is dancing to the tune that is played by those two character states, shall we say. The United States is attempting and has offered to put on the table to sit down with Iran one-on-one if they would like. I think that would be brilliant on Iran's part. They could use that very effectively in their own national policy to deal with a president who is not part of the established order, doesn't do things by the established order's rules, instead acts on principles, and those principles can be used to very good advantage, and the technique of negotiation to very good advantage by Iran to come up with a new deal, to come up with a new agreement, to actually reform and declare its independence from the foreign policies of Russia and China, who are very dangerously exploiting them and unfairly exploiting them, and striking a new deal that would be to the massive benefit, turnaround of an economy, a turnaround of a relationship, really that you could have few leaders in the world today that could be worked with as President Trump could be worked with. All you need is the gesture. All you need is the open mind to truly serve the real interests of your own people. Once that is done, you will find a ready, willing, able, enthusiastic, quite capable partner in the United States.
Okay, Frederick,
and
you made the point.
Set the world back on its ear. And yes, sir.
Okay, you made the point. Let me just ask Marcus what he thinks about this. And I wonder, Marcus, how Frederick trusts President Trump. Has been great at leaving and breaking the deal than making them, in a way. Your comments.
Well, that was a preposterously stupid argument that the other guest has just put forward, especially because Iran is not a client state of any country in the world. Indeed, ever since the Iranian Revolution of 1979, Iran has been a fiercely independent country. Yes, prior to the Iranian Revolution, Iran most certainly was a client state of the United States of America. But over the last 41 years, Iran has truly been an independent country pursuing an independent foreign policy. And any argument put forward which is designed to try and convince people that America is still a signatory to the JCPOA is once again preposterously stupid. America withdrew from the JCPOA 2 years ago in the hope that by withdrawing, the JCPOA would die a quick death. Yet 2 years on, the Iran nuclear deal, albeit a weakened deal as a result of America having withdrawn its signatory, continues to be in existence. Now, let me turn to the American hope of the United Nations Security Council agreeing to a permanent arms embargo on Iran. The prospect of that is utterly negligible. Why? Because Russia will simply veto it. Which then beggars the question, why would the Americans expect the United Nations Security Council to agree to something when the Americans, far from being unintelligent, know it has no prospect of succeeding? It is my contention that the Americans, by putting forward this argument to the Security Council, is doing so in an attempt, once again, to try and undermine the Iran nuclear deal by creating discord between Iran and the Europeans.
Okay, Marcus, let me come to that point.
Been steadfast in their support of the Iran nuclear deal, and the Americans are trying to cause tension between Iran and the Europeans.
Right. Okay. I'll come to that point certainly later on in the show. Let's now begin with first things first. Frederick, the U.S. is in violation of this resolution that Marcus was just talking about, Resolution 2231 of the United Nations. And that resolution strips Washington of the right to initiate anything that's stipulated in that resolution. Now, what do you have to say about that?
Bring it on. Bring it on. The object of the U.S. policy is a result of a U.S. election and a U.S. president. And we have new policy, a new president, and we have new opportunities that are available to potential partners around the world.
So, Frederick, in a year, you may have another new president. What's going to happen?
America and the... Sir?
A year later, you have maybe another new president, so another new deal?
Highly improbable. We're going to have an election coming up soon, and each day the shenanigans that are playing out, the desperation and almost comedic street theater that is being carried out in frustration to try to unseat this president is doing grave damage to any prospects of a change in the order. Once President Trump is reelected with perhaps even a stronger majority, you will see the opportunity continue and increase for a settlement, a real settlement that achieves real ends, not that is window dressing on graffiti painted on the wall. And as far as allies go and world organizations, they are populated by people that do not really think the way the American people have come to think. They're being exposed for the globalist connivers that they are, and it's simply not going to be accepted. We hope and pray that it will not be accepted, because it is for the detriment of the world if that were to happen. Your other guest, shall we say, spoke of the Iranian Revolution and how prior to the Iranian Revolution, the United States and Iran were much closer, as somehow he regrets or he is enthusiastic about the difference. I should ask the very simple political question that is asked in every legitimate political election anywhere in the world: are you better off now? The question has a very resounding answer.
Okay, let
the
Marcus
dangers that have been
it.
brought to Iran, the extraterritorial ambitions that are being engaged in by Iran, and the allies that Iran has replaced the United States with that are exploiting Iran and drawing Iran into ever deeper waters of danger must be replaced. This is a last final opportunity, and I hope Iran makes the right decision.
Okay, let's get.
I hope it has the right
to the
leadership to
main
make the
topic,
right decision.
Frederick. Marcus, if you want to give a quick response, and then let's get back to the main topic.
Well, that was a pitiful argument, which was supported by even more pitiful words, and it ranged between being tedious drivel and regurgitated bile. In answer to your guest's question, is Iran better off as a result of the Iranian Revolution? Most certainly, yes. Why? Because Iran was returned to the Iranian people as a result of the Iranian Revolution. Iran is no longer a vassal state. Iran is no longer dictated to. Iran is no longer a compliant, obsequious state to any country in the world, and that is because of the Iranian Revolution. Now, turning back to the subject matter in hand, we also have to take into consideration that this latest measure by the Americans to try and scupper the Iran nuclear deal is partly because this November we'll see a presidential election in America, and Donald Trump is already electioneering. And what better way to try and galvanize Americans, and in particular to retain the support of the Saudis and the Israelis, who played a very substantial role in his election victory in 2016, than by citing Iran, than by taking hostile measures towards Iran, because that will be met with absolute approval in both Riyadh and Tel Aviv. So Donald Trump and his administration know that there is no prospect of the United Nations Security Council agreeing to a permanent arms embargo on Iran. And they also know that the JCPOA is now going to continue. And I don't foresee any scenario, certainly no scenario at present, that would see the death of the Iran nuclear deal. And just returning very quickly to the Americans hoping that the Security Council will agree to a permanent arms embargo on Iran, even if through an act of God the Security Council was to agree to such a measure, then Iran can simply rely on its defense industry, a defense industry that has been built up for more than 4 decades and which has created a very substantial military force in Iran, a military force that is more than capable of defending the Iranian people from external aggression and internal threats sponsored
Okay, Marcus, if you allow me, I'll go to Frederick, if you allow me, and get back to the main topic. We're getting off tangents. Frederick, you know that some observers argue the U.S. attempt to extend this arms ban on Iran is a non-starter, and they believe it's a strategy to kill the nuclear deal for good. What do you think?
I think what I would reiterate what I said before.
We're talking about the arms ban,
Trump,
okay?
President Trump, the United States is conducting policy. I hear an overplay. At any rate, Trump and the United States are conducting policy in a way that is quite different from what is usual and what is expected. It is certainly within the rights of a country when the conditions have changed or when a prior agreement has been found to be, as a result of an election, a decision made to countervail decision that had previously been enforced into law, and simply walk away from it. There's no obligation to continue it. You could walk away from an agreement or walk off a team at any time.
Exactly, walk away and have nothing to do with the rest of it, Frederick.
I would rather that we not focus on the damage and the danger, but rather focus on the opportunity here, a huge opportunity. We don't necessarily need to go into detail the exporting of terror, the exporting of those arms you so eloquently described in a new defense industry that is stronger than it was before because it's exporting those weapons around the world and stirring up trouble among its neighbors. Think of what a revolution this would be if you were to take Iran reaching out to Saudi and to Israel and having some basis of agreement of peace, not always agreement in principle, but an agreement for peace among them, and a commitment to prosperity of the region and cooperation economic among them for the benefit of all the peoples.
Okay, Frederick.
You would have truly a revolutionary government.
We have only two minutes,
and you would
Frederick.
Find ready partners.
I got one last question. Frederick,
yes,
we have only 2 minutes, if you allow me. Marcus, Iran never initiated any war, and Iran's weapons helped the Iraqis get rid of Daesh terrorists. I don't know what Frederick's talking about, on what basis. What's wrong with Iran, given the information I gave you now? What's wrong with allowing Iran to import and export conventional weapons? U.S.-made weapons are taking the lives of innocent Yemenis at the hands of Saudis.
Well, let me just put it simply. The words of your guest in America are completely and utterly unsubstantiated, but nonetheless they epitomize this completely ignorant and prejudiced attitude that many Americans have towards a country which they know next to nothing about. And how ironic it was to hear your guest in America talk about terrorism and extremism, when it is Saudi Arabia, one of America's most important or strategic allies in the world, a country that Donald Trump has personal ties to, which is the chief financier of religious extremism and terrorism in the world, and is the chief exporter of religious terrorism and extremism in the world. And it is Saudi Arabia that has blood up to its neck, the blood of people, not just in the Middle East, but in many other countries around the world, including American blood, because it was Saudi terrorists who committed the atrocities in America on 9/11. And it is Iran who played the leading role in the destruction of ISIS in Iran. And it is Iran, alongside the Syrian army, the Russian military, and Hezbollah, that annihilated ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria at a time when both ISIS and Al-Qaeda received political and military support from Saudi Arabia.
All right, Marcus, unfortunately, we're out of time. Sorry for jumping in. We're out of time. Let me thank our guests. We had Senior Congressional Defense Advisor Frederick Peterson from New York and Editor of Politics First, Marcus Papadopoulos from London. And thank you for watching this debate. I've been your host, Behruz Najafi, and I'll see you next time.